I just thought, well, it's a phase. I at first I didn't see people specifically, honestly arguing that the Crusades should be something that we would emulate, that there would be good, positive Christian truth to be derived from the Pope's Crusades, offensive military invasions to protect. Well, but they were protecting Christians. They were seeking to reestablish Christian control of holy sites for pilgrimages.
The biggest anti-Christian decision by al-Hakim was his order to destroy the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem in 1009, one of the holiest sites of Christianity.
You read what these sources say, and they deal honestly. They'll give you the quotations from the various popes. I may have to take the time to go back through and read these things and establish the theological character of the Crusade.
By the 4th century, the 4 most important Christian churches existed in Antioch, Alexandria, the old capital of the West in Rome, and the shining new capital of the East, Constantinople.
That the Crusades were an offensive Roman Catholic military excursion outside of the lands where Roman Catholicism predominated, which involved invasion of non-Roman Catholic lands.
In the 7th century, an unexpected threat arose out of the southern deserts. The Arabs of the Rashidun Caliphate, embodying a new religion, Islam, swallowed up the southern half of the Mediterranean. This had a polarizing effect upon Christendom, for Antioch and Alexandria were now in Muslim hands.
Lionizing the Crusaders as embodying the kind of masculine bravery and, I would think, Christ-centeredness. I mean, they've got a cross on their right there, you know.
Against all odds, Bohemond and his 700 managed to repel a force of 10,000 with a combination of shock tactics, bravery, and insanity.
Believe me, people coming out of medieval Europe did not look like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Like many other contemporary Arab chroniclers, he recognized their military capabilities. All those who were well informed about the Frank saw them as beasts, superior in courage and fighting ardor, but nothing else. Just as animals are superior in strength and aggression, Franks, God curse them, are the most cautious of all men in war.
Merit before God. And that's the only way you can sell people on leaving family and lands and traveling across Europe, walking, riding, whatever, to a foreign land, because the Pope has promised that if you die in battle against the infidel, you will have eternal life.
In his letters, the Pope recognizes that the response was larger than he ever anticipated and desperately attempts to take back control of the situation. To neither clerics nor monks, however, do we concede permission to go without the permission of their bishops or abbots. Let it be the bishop's duty to permit their parishioners to go only with the advice and provision of the clergy. Nor should young married men rashly set out on the journey without the consent of their spouses.
On the basis of you're going on pilgrimages. We all agree. Oh, yeah, you can't do it by going on pilgrimages. You can't do it by buying indulgences. But put a cross on your armor and die, and that's okay. We'll let that one slide.
In another letter sent to Iberia, he writes, "If the knights of other provinces have decided with one mind to go to the aid of the Asian Church and to liberate their brothers from the tyranny of the Saracens, so ought you with one mind and with our encouragement to work with greater endurance to help a church so near you resist the invasion of the Saracens."
But the vast majority of those people who could be fooled into thinking that their righteousness before God could be determined by going and killing the infidel have been given a false gospel.
So if any of you has made up his mind to go to Asia, it is here instead that he should try to fulfill his vow, because it is no virtue to rescue Christians from the Saracens in one place, only to expose them to the tyranny and oppression of the Saracens in another.
I mean, can we just think back to just last October? Did any of you, put up a image of Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the Wittenberg door? Maybe, possibly. When I raise these issues, and then I go and add, wow, there was really no concern whatsoever about reaching the Muslim people with the gospel. And there wasn't.
The destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 1009 enabled Muslim mobs to destroy many other churches in Fatimid territory and to loot their possessions.
You can try to make that up if you want to. I've seen people trying to say, oh, well, that opened up opportunities for missionaries and stuff like that. Who? What were they preaching? Those armies were not concerned about the conversion. They weren't trained with the best arguments against Islam.
Before the battle began, a Christian bishop rode over to Khalid's army and attempted to negotiate a Muslim withdrawal. However, the Rashidun general simply responded by offering the traditional choice: conversion to Islam, payment of the jizya tax, or death in battle.
Of people demonstrating they have no desire at all to be used of Christ to bring Muslims to the truth. None. None. I saw it over and over again. And that's what you ended up with in the Crusades.
Peter the Hermit was sent to negotiate with Kaboga and offered a group trial by combat, where 5, 10, 20 or 100 men on each side would fight to prevent mass casualties. But the Atabeg simply laughed in his face and demanded that they surrender and convert to Islam if they wanted to live.
But these folks, there is a deep, and people are purposefully seeking to create this, a deep detestation of those who have come before, lionizing the Crusaders. Y'all are talking about, we need leaders. In what? Leaders in what? What do you want to be led into? Christendom. My experience is, until certain things happen in your life to where you recognize the need of maturity, that you will resent those who direct you to self-denial, discipline, working selflessly toward the future.
The Hospitallers brought this reverence of poverty to a new level, portraying themselves as the serfs and slaves of his lords, who were the sick people of the world. In that way, it seems that the brothers of the order imagined themselves as the property of their patients. To this end, an alderman's clothes were generally humble and minimal. He was expected to wash patients and remake their beds. This even extended to noble brothers of the sword.
Some of the best leaders you're going to find are going to be found in the best history books.
Upon seeing the Muslim banners waving from the walls, the king initially believed Jaffa to be lost. However, a defender managed to swim to the flagship and inform Richard of the citadel's resistance. Again showing his military prowess, Richard the Lionheart leapt into the sea and waded through the shallows in order to reach the shore at the head of his army. Shocked by the brazen assault, and afraid that this was just the spearhead of a far larger force, the Muslims panicked and routed, spilling out of Jaffa in a disorderly manner where many were killed in the retreat. Saladin struggled to maintain control of his army at this point, and could not bring them to order until they were 5 miles inland.
It was only a few months ago I was reading to you from the works of Adoniram Judson. And from the world's perspective, here's a man who gave himself. He was imprisoned. He suffered. He was hungry. He was ill. He was sick. Most of his compatriots died of diseases.
But Richard had been struck in the side by a crossbow bolt.
Take up your cross. Taking up your cross and following Jesus was joining the death march. It wasn't putting your cross on your armor to go murder the infidels.
Instructed the Crusaders to lead a religious procession around the city walls with bare feet. As the huge mass of people passed along the walls blowing trumpets, they were bombarded by the garrison, which resulted in many men, especially priests, being pierced by arrow fire.
The video of the Muslim man, at least I didn't hear him saying Allahu Akbar, but he seemed to be speaking a Middle Eastern language, that stabbed and killed the man in Birmingham, in the UK. Right on video, and they're mocking him as he's bleeding out and dying. Slash his throat. And that man should have had the capacity to defend his life against that attacker. You say, well, that's what the Crusades were. No, it wasn't. That's the whole point. That's not what the Crusades were. This wasn't a defensive war. People have said, well, we're just simply defending Christendom. Well, there's another problem with Christendom.
The outline of this massive project was set, and regardless of which version we interpret, the points Urban was trying to make are clear. Christendom should unite and stop its internal sinful conflicts, and instead direct them against the Muslims, who commit atrocities against the pilgrims.
And if you can be so confused as to think that that means that it was appropriate to offer salvation to people who cross a continent to murder the infidel, to protect quote-unquote holy sites, then you're very confused.
The biggest anti-Christian decision by al-Hakim was his order to destroy the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem in 1009.
What if you live in a free land that is being betrayed by its leaders? In comparison to the early church that was in a non-free empire, used whatever freedom they had to proclaim the gospel, but you did not have the Bill of Rights. You did not have the Second Amendment. Where is the line drawn?
I have heard about you, Alexios told him, that you are a very powerful knight and prince in your land, and a very wise man and completely honest. Because of this, I am taking you as my adopted son, and I am putting everything I possess in your power, so that my empire and land can be freed and saved through you from the present and future multitudes.
And there are disagreements amongst Christians where it is, but there should not be any disagreements amongst Reformed Christians that there is no reason to lionize the Crusades. A deep detestation of those who have come before. I'm really concerned that what we're going to see is we're going to see people have gone, I started my studies in these things thinking that Roman Catholicism was what I had heard in church from Martin Luther and the evil Pope, and I've come to discover that there's a whole lot more to it.
When you see the Lord lift
And this
up like
Christendom
this,
thing
you
sounds
are
like a
looking
really
at
cool
Calvary.
idea.
When you
But
see
the only
Lord
way to
lift
have
up like this,
Christendom-
you're participating in His restoration of the
And I've been
world.
watching Roman Catholics
Because
who are
every
watching
time
this
that
going,
happens,
come on
the
home.
Father is glorified,
Come on
and the
home.
world is sanctified, the
This-
world is restored.
You're
the
paddling
world is
around out there in the
renewed.
Tiber. Come on home. Now, what's going to happen is everything else I've said about the atonement, the gospel, stuff like that, you're going to forget about all that.